Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution. And it is the morning after Thanksgiving. And I don't know about you, but there are days that I now wake up and think, where exactly do I belong in this whole world circus? I grew up believing there was a group that I might fit into, a spiritual group, a political leaning group, a professional organization. But what I have come to realize, I just feel a little bit like an outcast, honestly. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because I don't fit in the Republican tent. I don't fit into the Democrat tent. I don't fit into the socialist tent at all. I don't feel like I fit in the Christian tent. I don't feel like I fit in the work tent. I don't feel like I fit in the metaphysical spiritual tent either. I feel like everything that I believe is different than the strict guidelines of any of these tents. And it sometimes feels like there is no tent big enough to contain me. I've been accused of being a little extra. And I would posit that there's not a tent big enough to contain you either. All so often, the outside world has tried to pigeonhole me. Anybody relate to that? Into any of these tents. They want to pigeonhole me by my political persuasion, my spiritual persuasion, my professional persuasion, and they are all in the same tent, the God tent. The real truth is that I'm in the one tent, the big God tent, which embodies freedom, grace, love, kindness, and dignity. And do I do any of those perfectly? Oh my goodness, no. But what I've discovered over the last period of time is that I feel like I am not fully in any of those tents. But what I do have is this unwavering truth that I am one with God. That's it. Which coincidentally is not a recognized political party on any ballot yet. And I want to start by saying today's episode is not political, it's human, it's spiritual. It's a gentle but firm reminder that we are creating our reality, not from our talking points, but from our frequency. So, I'm going to share about being an outcast in a world of people who want you to pick a side before they'll decide if they can love you. This is what I find so hilarious is that we live in this world. We are in a world of duality just by the virtue of the fact that we're on the planet. So we have yin and yang, and we have light and dark. We have this thing called good and bad. And yet, there is this whole idea out there on the planet that says, I've got to pick a side the way that I believe before people can say that they love me or you. And at this point, I just feel like I can't. I mean, I do speak, but feel like I'm measured because I don't belong anywhere. I really truly feel like I don't. And I wanted to share that this morning because I wondered if anyone else feels that. Do you feel politically, spiritually, or professionally homeless lately? We don't have a home to land in because it seems like everyone out there is shouting, this is the only way. This is the only way. What way? I'm over here sipping my tea like, well, actually, I can see all sides and also none of them. And when I say that, it's because if we really incorporate the idea that we are one, then we have to believe that everybody is doing the best that they can. I believe in humanity, not hashtags. And I always take a walk every day. I go to the park. And I love country western music. Why? Because it's really poetry. But there's one beautiful song by Luke Bryan that says, "Most people are good." And I love that song. except for when he says most people, because it infers that all people are good. And this is where we get stuck as this human race. We haven't fully incorporated the idea that all people are good. All people are good because you either believe that God is everywhere or you don't. And if you don't believe that God is everywhere, please stop saying that and stop talking about your spirituality because all people are good. Now, I can see that we live in this 3D world and that we have laws and that people have to follow the laws because I mean even Jesus said that. There you have to work within the organized government that you live in. But all people are good even when their behavior is questionable because they're doing the best they can, even when their words are harsh. However, it's important to know what the consequences of that are. All people are good even when they've forgotten who they are, because we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And what causes this upset in us as human beings? There's just one thing, one bottom line thing. It's fear. When we let that fear take over us, then anger is a result. Anger is a result of fear. It is the result of nothing else. And then we get into the tribalism of our factions and forget 100% let that knowingness leak out of our beingness and forget that we are all one. We are all God stuff wrapped in temporary human packaging. Because listen, folks, this thing called the meat stick that we walk around in is temporary. And on the bigger, larger scale of gazillions of years that this planet has existed, not 2000, what do they say, billion years old? It's some unfathomable number. But if you think about it, a human life, even if it was an average of 100 years, we'll just use that number as it. That is so minimal compared to what is happening. And I believe that we are eternal. Now, what happens when we go? I don't know. I don't particularly think there's a place called heaven because we are too big to be in time and space. We have constructed this time and space thing on Earth, but you can get off of the planet and all of a sudden we don't have gravity. So to think that we're so narcissistic to believe that the Earth is the end all be all, that kind of cracks me up. I digress. We are all this God stuff wrapped in temporary human packaging, and that's where I begin this conversation. So when I see this division in the society, the human species, I can see that it isn't our politics and it isn't our religions or our status in society, even though that's the outward picturing. The real divide is that thing called fear. It's between people living from fear and people living from freedom. And if you're living from freedom, the natural outpicturing of that is gratitude, which this is the point of all of this podcast today is to be reflecting on yesterday as this day of Thanksgiving, but more importantly, how do we live in that Thanksgiving, in that gratitude every single moment of every single day? Because if you understand these universal laws, if your energy is fearful, that then projects out as hateful, aggressive, name calling, and ready to throw hands at strangers online, which this whole keyboard warrior thing is, guess what? This is the universal law that reigns on the just and the unjust alike. There is no exception. You are creating your reality. So, guess what? Your reality is reflecting exactly that back to you. More fear, more anger. And it's not because of politics or your spiritual or not spiritual beliefs. It's not your bank account. It's not your profession. It's not your occupation. It's universal law.
You don't get to plant cactus seeds and expect roses. What you plant expands and grows. You don't get to scream, everyone is wrong, and magically attract peace. Duality is useful until we decide it's our truth. Then it becomes your prison, which is where so many people are, including myself when I fall into the fear trap, because it's so easy given the amount of data that's coming at us every single day. We have exponentially dialed up the data delivery systems. Now, I feel like we have a Jesus problem. So some of you are leaning in or some of you are leaning out. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. I want to talk about the part of this Jesus problem that has caused me heartburn for decades. There was a time when I turned away from the teachings. I was raised in a Presbyterian church environment, and I would turn away from the teachings of Christianity when I saw the hypocrisy of the question, what would Jesus do? I remember years ago, people would walk around, they probably still make them, these little wristbands, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Which I think is a brilliant question because Jesus was a way shower. He was here as the embodiment of that oneness, of that consciousness. However, so much of that journey, that lifelong journey for me was looking at the hypocrisy of what would Jesus do and then saying that you have to do it this way, otherwise you are doomed to go to hell. And I just couldn't quite reconcile that this Jesus dude, this is when I'm young, this Jesus dude would say that. So I began a lifelong journey to explore, to research, to be curious about what other spiritual traditions taught. Because what I knew, even as a young teenager, you cannot claim Christianity as your cornerstone and also live in unforgiveness. This is one of the core principles of the Bible itself, of Jesus's teachings, is forgiveness. So when you are forgiving, if you're forgiving unceasingly, it's not for the other persons, it's for yourself because what you're doing is you're washing away your judgment. So the idea that you live in unforgiveness and you're judging as my way or the highway, that seemed very hypocritical to me. So I began on this journey. I remember going to this place called the Bodhi Tree in North Hollywood, and it was just filled with books of different teachings. And as a kid who grew up in a very smaller community in Southern California, I didn't get a lot of those types of knowledge. And what I discovered was a more spiritual teaching, not a religious teaching. And I've referred to it as metaphysical because simply it is meta, which is beyond the physical. That's it. I'm looking beyond our physical 3D, five senses, judgmental beingness, because that's what we do as humans until you really connect with this higher vibrational energy. And I found these teachings over a period of time that I thought I had found my tribe of people that really acknowledged that as well. And of course, again, I always feel like I'm the outcast in a group because I don't buy into the hook, line, and sinker of every teaching. And this is what I teach other people is to really begin to look at what your heart is telling you, what your intuition is telling you. And so I thought I had found my tribe only to realize after this COVID thing happened that that wasn't my people either. Because this oneness that was being taught that God is everything and we were all one with each other, they were turning into what I had seen with the Christian teaching of this is the right way and you are the wrong way. Oh my gosh, I was so gobsmacked by that that I was struck and it's been this new experience for me to see that there are so many tribes that are exclusionary on the planet. And what I'm saying is, we all want to come back to understand that we're all one tribe. We're the human race. I began to notice that my new spiritual community was holding at arm's length anybody that might have a conservative thought. Even though I'm not in the tent fully, I'm still leaning in that direction. And then this new thought spirituality was saying that that's not an allowed combination. Again, being told how I should think and believe when I know the truth. I've always known the truth. I just was looking for a place to coalesce it, to say, oh my gosh, this is my tribe. Well, you know what I do know is my tribe is the human race. And as long as I stay in that knowingness and that beingness, then I can connect everywhere. And yet we feel this tribal desire as human species, just like nature. So what I do know is that I love Jesus's teachings. I love what Jesus did was to embody the truth of the universal law. What I don't particularly love is the doctrine that says I have to take this thing called the Bible literally instead of the spiritual teaching and the metaphoric explanations. So I've actually created a course called the Metaphysical Teachings of the Bible, and it's coming out next year. I follow the teachings of the way shower Jesus. I love the way shower because I'm a way shower. I'm showing the way to the oneness. That is all. And if you understand that everything about our lives generates from our internal knowingness, our internal beingness, then we begin to see that I have the autonomy, I have the agency to create a life that is beautiful and wonderful and joyous. So just because I don't follow of this idea that Jesus is the only way, truth, and light, because when I was a small girl, I just kept thinking there's millions of people on this planet who are just as spiritual as a woman that I actually hold in high esteem right now, Erica Kirk. Erica Kirk is the embodiment of the principles of Christianity because I think we've gotten lost with rhetoric in all factions, political, spiritual, business wise, money wise. But it's the principles that we embody, which are those of the universal laws. And as I began to see that there are people just like me on the planet who are as spiritual as I felt I was being, or Erica Kirk is being, or Jesus was being, they were practicing it in a different religion, if you will. And what I do love about Erica Kirk, I want to talk about her for a second because she's practicing these principles. And believe me, the principles that I share, that she shares, are freaking hard, especially this component about forgiveness and about gratitude. But when you can begin to embody those true spiritual teachings, those beliefs of Christ or of Buddha or the Hindus, then and only then, when you immerse yourself in them, then you begin to walk that talk and become this energy on the planet, which is healing us in a way that nobody can actually see or quantify right now. It's amazing what's happening on the planet. I thought it was very fascinating that after he got the award from the president, and I posted her transcript. Like I didn't have a conversation about good or bad. I thought it was beautiful of a woman who had had her husband assassinated in public. This whole conversation about people saying that he deserved it. That is not a spiritual energy in any way, shape, or form. And yet I posted it on my Facebook and I had a very good, I thought, friend from my spiritual days in California of teaching these principles. once again, in that faction that now says what I believe is wrong, send me a personal message that said, how could you support a woman like that and not support and fill in the blank? It wasn't an either or conversation. I was just having a statement about someone that I could relate to this grief that she was experiencing. And this is where it's so important for us to really begin to remember that we are in this bigger tent. This bigger tent, the one Jesus actually shared about, because he was here sharing the good news, which the good news is that we are little God beings. We're all one, and we can do all of the things that he did. As a matter of fact, he said it quite succinctly. He was very clear. These things you shall do also, and greater. So, what does that say? That we all can be like Jesus. We don't have to be Jesus. We are Jesus's. This Christ consciousness is so important to understand, that it clearly is just understanding how these universal laws work. He understood them and he was part of them. He taught this universal law. He taught belief. You are as you believe. He taught my favorite thing of all times, which is frequency. He was the frequency of love incarnate. He taught embodiment. And the most important thing that I believe most people forget is he healed people. He created miracles because they believed. It's very clear if you do read Jesus's voice that he said, I do this because they believe. This is the beauty of the teachings of Jesus, is that he wasn't doing anything. And this is when I became a practitioner for this spiritual teaching, is it was never about me. I could land and hold the space for someone to believe that they could be healed, that they could be abundant, that they could be prosperous. But it isn't my belief. It's their belief that creates whatever that outpicturing is. And there's a great story in the Bible that talks about Jesus going back to his hometown. And he wasn't able to perform miracles there because no one saw him as that miracle worker. They saw him as little Jesus, the kid. And it was as if there's a saying that says familiarity breeds contempt. They saw him as something other than other people because it was the belief. It's that placebo effect that we have with medicines. Because I believe or you believe, then it is created. He healed because they believed. And that, my beautiful ones, is universal law. It's not theology. That's physics with a halo. Somewhere along the way, we turned Jesus into a mascot, literally. I really believe that. I have this embodiment of the Christ consciousness, which is not a being, that is an energy. And the other thing is, we've lost the metaphor in this telephone game of history. Because I don't know if you realize this. All ancient spiritual teachings were passed down. They didn't start writing them in books until we had the ability to do that. All of these ancient spiritual teachings were passed down over millions of years through oral traditions. And then eventually, when the ability to write things on parchment was developed, then they were written down. But imagine we passed down these spiritual teachings through these oral traditions for all the years prior to the actual documentation of them. And if you ever played a game of telephone tag, you know by the fourth person, the story is sideways. And what usually can come through is the thread, the golden thread that weaves through all of them. So, some 2,000 years later, after being able to write things down, come on, we've lost the plot, the spiritual plot, which is God is all there is. taught so many courses on authenticity because that's what we're all missing here, this missing ingredient that we are unique expressions of the one. We are here, God trying to experience itself. And when we begin to lose our authenticity because we want approval, like I said at the beginning of this, I feel like I don't have a tent. I'm an outcast. And yet I feel so congruent with the truth of who I am. And maybe that fits in and maybe that doesn't. But my authenticity is the most important thing for me in my life to know that I am a unique expression of this one. And so what I notice is most people aren't living as themselves. They are a constructed version of everything that they have been imprinted with, how they've learned from influencers who's teaching them about their truth. And you have no ability to be curious and explore what you truly are. Who are you? So we're living as the mask that our cultures give us. Our cultures, our families, those people around us, where we go to work, how we spend time in our churches and our mosques. So now we come up with these masks: the good wife, the good Christian wife, the good Muslim wife, or the strong, silent man, or the mother, or the working mother, or or the woman who said, I don't want to be a mother, a loyal party member. We've all put these masks on, and some of us are just the person who never rocks the boat mask. Or are you the person who works hard because you see and been convinced that the badge of honor to success is busyness? All of these masks, all of these roles are just adopted ways that you show up because you believe that that allows you to fit in instead of knowing, who am I truly? And then I look around and I say, I wonder why are people so angry, exhausted, lost, or lashing out? That would be why. You're jumping hurdles to try to be something that you're not. Because you see, anytime a human is forced into a role that conflicts with their soul, you know what the side dish is? Resentment. So we have all these side dishes at Thanksgiving. The main event is the turkey, and that's you, your authentic self. But all these side dishes are vying for their position in hierarchy. And all of these side dishes are resentment. You don't fix resentment with policy, with religious dogma, or high paying job. What you do heal it with is permission. The permission to choose whether you want to be married or single. There is no right way, and yet it has to be a soul decision, not one led by a viral TikTok video. Decide if you want to bear children, you want to be a parent. Because being that woman who never had kids, it's hard to put into words what that journey is like. And if you choose it, it's very much like a salmon swimming upstream. Traditional or unconventional? Do you want to be quiet or outspoken? Your feeling, your energy. My personal lane is sovereignty because that is your supreme choice over your life. As a sovereign individual, you are making choices radically responsible every day for your life. I want to just touch on a conversation that keeps coming up over and over and over these days. And with sovereignty, there's this idea of free speech. But this loud conversation these days circulates around the idea that I can say whatever I want. And depending on who you talk to, free speech is either say anything you want to the dismay of anybody else, or say anything I agree with. So I want to share with you the way I learned about free speech when I was growing up, which is pretty damn simple. You can say anything you want until you're harming someone else. That's it. And so the example was always given. If I yell fire in a crowded theater, that is not free speech. That is harmful. Calling strangers subhuman online is harmful. Using words to dehumanize is harmful. But here's the really easy version, the version that every mother has said since the beginning of time. If you can't say anything nice, say nothing at all. And in today's world, shut your frickin' phone off and take a walk. There is something called nonviolent communication that was used by Martin Luther King and started by, oh my gosh, Rosen. I can't think of his first name. He was a Jewish scholar. But we aren't practicing nonviolent communication because communication can be violent. And it's nonviolent communication has disappeared completely when social media gave everyone a megaphone and zero accountability. It's time to take radical responsibility for your speech, for your talk, for your communication. It's as simple as that. And honestly, you would think it would be something really simple, but apparently it's challenging for people. Somewhere along the line, we forgot how to discuss, have a conversation, connect with the soul of our fellow humans. Debate is civil, not judgmental. This is why when I watched Charlie Kirk, I was thinking, well, that's a really good way to connect with people is to have a debate. Most of us never even learn about what debating is. What we have learned over the past probably 3 decades is just to yell, and that doesn't accomplish anything. Because when we attempt to destroy someone else through words, it completely flies in the face of the idea that in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God. Anybody that does believe in the Bible, that believes in those teachings, should recognize that the Word was God. So therefore, every word we speak is a prayer. So what are we praying for? For somebody else to be hurt? For someone else to be damaged? We have forgotten how to see God in the face of every single being on this earth. So here's the thing about human law, as I call universal law. It works all the time. It doesn't ever stop working. And whether you understand it or believe it or even agree with it doesn't matter. It's always working. So I always use that in terms with our human laws. And speeding is a really interesting topic because I see people speed all the time. And I used to be a person that sped on the highway. But if the speed limit is 65 and you go 80, in the human laws, you might get away with it if there's no law enforcement around. That's just the fact of it. It may show up in a different way. You may hurt yourself, you may hurt somebody else. But the universal law is not like that. And it isn't as if there's a cop being an arbiter that says, oh, bad, you did something bad. It just accepts everything you put into it. That's it. It accepts everything you put into it and says yes to exactly that. It is a 100% mirror of what you're believing, what you're saying, and what you're doing. And the consequences aren't moral. This is the thing, is that we've got into this idea that we as humans, we understand how God works. God is just this universal consciousness. So we've got into the idea that God is judgmental, probably because some of those stories that are in the Bible of God sitting on a big throne and throwing out judgment consequences. Those consequences are our internal mechanism for our own morality, but they are this universal consciousness, this spirituality. You put into the universal law, whatever it is you're thinking, believing, and saying, and it's mathematical, it's precise, and it treats everybody exactly the same. So when you plant your belief, you harvest your reality. So if you're putting in hatred and meanness and bullying, you're going to get it back. You plant in resentment, your harvest is chaos. If you're seeing chaos, What are you planting in order to see that? And when you plant this beautiful thing called gratitude, gratitude is the gateway. Your harvest is abundance. So make no mistake, we live in cause and effect. We are the cause creating the effect because the universal consciousness is always saying yes. We don't live in cause and excuse. It's cause and effect. Your responsibility is to pay attention to what cause you are putting into this universal law. Because when we stop taking responsibility for our actions, society falls out of alignment with the truth of who we truly are. Radical responsibility isn't punishment, it's power. And I want to talk about something that's out there in the zeitgeist so much these days. And this is part of this universal consciousness that is so interesting. So I want to talk about this very plainly, and hopefully it will fall on the ears of somebody that is practicing this. And now it's time to look at it differently. I've lived a life in the United States for 70 years, part time in some other countries. And I have seen so many different things. And it seems that in 2024 to 2025, all of a sudden the United States has become Nazi Germany. Now, I grew up learning about Nazi Germany, knowing about Nuremberg. And I promise you, if you've actually studied history, you know that these comparisons are just lazy emotional shortcuts. Because as I've lived through so many presidents, so many, some I loved, some I survived like a bad perm until my hair grew back. Because this is what happens in a society that is based on elections. But elections change, leaders change. And some of these leaders were not great, some of them were. And we get another shot every 4 years. So the hysteria is part of that energetic negativity that doesn't allow you as a human to flourish. We need a little perspective. And you know what that is? The gateway is gratitude. We have to be grateful for every single thing in our lives, not just the things that we like. So it's, as I said, the morning after Thanksgiving. And I always find a little humor that we have to set aside a specific day to be grateful. Gratitude is an unceasing emotion. If we were to be in gratitude every moment of every day, oh my God, how our lives would look differently. And this is where I always come from. Gratitude is the portal. It is the frequency that reminds us we never lost anything that truly belonged to us. You come in with this already installed. You come in with the ability to have dignity, to have self respect, and you are sovereign. And chaos will feel smaller when we return to gratitude. Division feels sillier, and fear feels way less convincing. Because gratitude brings us back to God as one, not God as my side's mascot, not God as your version of how the world needs to operate. No matter what side you feel like you are on, there are no sides if we're all one. So I want to make a declaration to call back love and radical responsibility by giving you an invitation today. Let everyone else argue about politics. Let everyone else demand you pick a label. Let everyone else scream into the void. You, my love, come home to the truth that you are one with God, that we are all one with God. I am one, you are one. We are one with each other. And when we remember that, the fear dissolves. Literally, it just dissolves. The illusion of separation melts away. And we can disagree without dehumanizing, discuss without destroying, and build without belittling. We will never fix the world through ideology. We fix it through our own understanding and authenticity of who we are. Our true identity is divine, sovereign, free, compassionate, powerful, and responsible. So that's my political party. That's my spiritual truth. That's my occupation. And the membership is open and free. So today I say amen to that. I say, and so it is. And let's keep seeing the good in each other, the oneness in our world. Have an amazing holiday season.